Hi. I don't know what else to say. The year is almost over. It's December. That's crazy to me. Where did all the time go? November passed by. I read 9 books this month, and most of them were for school. We're doing modernism this term, so most of it is modernist books. I had a great time, to be honest, with the books. No further comment. The first book we read for the course was As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. It was kind of wild. It was kind of gross. Very grim in many different ways. This book is about a family who goes on a journey to bury their mother who has passed away. The title actually comes from the Odyssey because they're going on an Odyssey. Is it Odyssey or Odyssey? It's probably Odyssey. Is that light too bright? I don't like it. That's better, right? Yeah. Lots of things happen during this journey that you wouldn't want happening to the body of your dead mother, but these characters, they're all dealing with their own shit anyway. What I love most about this book, smack in the middle, there is this chapter from the mother's perspective, and it turns out that she absolutely despises her whole family, which makes it so much funnier. I mean, it's not a funny book, but it's kind of a vibe. I feel like the quality of my phone is just getting worse, but it might be the light. It's winter. Let's just blame that. Next book we read for the class was Flush by Virginia Woolf, which I had already read, but I reread it because it's about a dog and I love dogs. Flush, the autobiography of a dog. Is it an autobiography? Biography of a dog. The undertitle is not in this edition. Yeah, it's about the dog of the poet Elizabeth Browning, was that her name? Elizabeth Barrett Browning, that's her name. She has a little cocker spaniel, and this book is about his life. He gets kidnapped at one point, which is very sad, but after that he has a very nice life with his family. It's great. I think, honestly, this is my favorite Virginia Woolf. I'm not ashamed to say that. The next book I read, it's Assembly by Natasha Brown. Got this from the library. It's very short. This is about a black woman in the UK who is married or just with a white man who is from a very rich family. I didn't really like this book, but I did think it got the message that it wanted to get across very well. It was just not written in a way that I love it, but it did do what it came out to do. So it's a me problem, definitely. I think this was a very good book. It was just not my kind of literature, if that makes sense. There were some parts in here, because I'm also following a class on post-colonialism, there was a lot of things in here that I recognized from that. There were some writers being mentioned that we were talking about in class on the days that I was reading this book, which I always find fun. So it's good. It's just not exactly my taste, but it was good. And I really need to take this back to the library because I've had it for weeks. I always feel bad hoarding library books. The next book is a book I listened to on audiobook, and it's Wij slaven van Suriname by Anton de Kom, which is a Dutch book about slavery in the former Dutch colony of Suriname. I don't know what the English name, Suriname? I read somewhere recently it being referred to as Dutch Guyana, and I'd never actually heard that. I knew of French Guyana, but not Dutch Guyana. Anyway, it's in South America. The Dutch colonized it basically just to have slaves working there, and that colony had some of the worst treatment of slaves in the entire history of the transatlantic slave trade. And it's insane to me that I didn't know the half of it before I read this book. I think every Dutch person has to read this book, period, because we learn some things about this, obviously, in history in school, but not to the extent that we should. Crazy to me that it took up until this year for the royal family to apologize for all these things that happened when this book has been existing for a very long time. It's available everywhere, and if you read it, you can absolutely not deny that is a history to be very, very, very ashamed of. It's crazy to me that most of the people in this country do not know shit about it and do not give a fuck either, and it's crazy, and it's making me angry, especially regarding the election results we got recently. If you are Dutch, you have to read bijslapen van Suriname. There's a great audiobook on the free library app that you get when you become a member of your local library. I will say some of it was hard to read. I mean, there was a lot of details in there of punishments and things that were being done to people. Some of it made me sick to my stomach, to be honest, but it's things that we obviously shouldn't be sleeping on. So I read that for fun, if you can believe it. The next book we read for school was Macunaíma by a Brazilian guy. This one, to be specific. I don't speak Portuguese, and every time my teacher said this name out loud, I didn't get what he was doing. Apparently it's not that much like Spanish at all. Anyway, this is a Brazilian classic. Brazilians probably know this is some of the weirdest shit I ever read. And it's fun, but it's also wild. And it's kind of crazy. I actually read in the original preface that the author had written. The point of this book is that the Brazilian modernists were looking for like the Brazilian identity, and because of, you know, the many mixed cultures in Brazil, it was hard to like find the one identity of the Brazilian. So this book is a combination of a lot of Brazilian folklore, but what he's tried to do is make it one hero, Macunaíma, go through all of these stories, and he is vile, he is an asshole, he's very selfish, he's only out for the money, he's only out to fuck people, essentially. He is not a hero in the conventional sense of the word, but he is referred to as Macunaíma, the hero, throughout the whole book. It's ironic, obviously, not very subtle in that way either. Everything in this book is so over the top and just completely insane that it is fun to read. The next book I read was Autumn by Ellie Smith, because it's autumn. This is about a woman getting her passport renewed. And also her old neighbor, who was her best friend when she was growing up. I don't know if she wouldn't have called him her best friend, but who was her friend growing up, is in an elderly home, pretty much dying, but not really. He's just very old. And so she's visiting her mother for the first time in like 10 years to be around him. But it's an Ellie Smith book, so like not that much is going on, but also a lot is going on. I love the art history lessons in this. That was great. I will say Ellie Smith, at least in the seasonal quartet, for as far as I'm aware, she writes about Brexit a lot. I was reading this during the time the election results came out in my country, and I was not in the mood to be reading all that. She didn't say too much about it though, so it was fine. But I was glad to move on to something else when it was over. But it was good. Anyway, next we read Tender Buttons by Gertrude Stein, which is a book full of bullshit sentences. Do you know what? I never read from these books because I am terrible at reading out loud. I can't do it. But I just want to read you some of this because it doesn't matter if I fuck it up. A canister that is the remains of furniture, and a looking glass, and a bedroom, and a larger size. All the stand is shrouded, and what is ancient is practical. Should the resemblance be so that any little cover is copied? Should it be so that the yards are measured? Should it be so, and should there be a sin? Should it be so, then certainly a room is big enough when it is empty, so the corners are gathered together. I had a great time reading this book. The teacher in the beginning of the course, he was like, you guys are not gonna like this. You guys are gonna fucking hate me for making you read this. But I don't. I had a great time reading this. And do you know what it was? It's very nice to surrender yourself to words. I will say I read most of this out loud because it's harder to read in your mind, I think. But when you're like hearing the words spoken out loud, even from your own mouth, you can just kind of listen to the way that they sound and just listen to the way that they sound. You don't have to pay attention to a story, you don't have to pay attention to characters, you don't have to pay attention to anything. You can just enjoy the vibe of the words. It's incredible. When I started reading this, I was like, this reads like an AI used predictive text. I want to read some more. Book was there, it was there. Book was there, stop it, stop it. It was a cleaner, a wet cleaner, and it was not where it was wet. It was not high, it was directly placed back. Not back again, back it was returned. It was needless. It put a bank when, a bank care. Suppose a man realistic expression of resolute reliability suggests pleasing itself white, all white, and no head. Does that mean soap? It does not so. It means kind waivers and little chance to beside rest. A plane. She's going off. Water astonishing and difficult altogether makes a meadow and a stroke. I mean, you can't tell her she's wrong. I was slightly biased against Gertrude Stein before this because I read the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas. I don't know why, but I always have to point out these books to you when I'm talking about them, just so like you know that they are present in the room while I talk about them. Can't talk too much shit, she's within hearing distance, but I didn't like that one at all because it's called the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, which is the lover of Gertrude Stein. First of all, it's not an autobiography because obviously Gertrude Stein wrote it, and second of all, she is only writing about herself. I think if I read it now, I could probably appreciate it more because it's obviously not meant to be serious. I'm not sure if that woman ever did anything serious in her life. And also, wait, I'm holding this open with a drumstick that I caught from the support act at the Avril Lavigne concert because Jeanette Winterson wrote an essay on Gertrude Stein, a testimony against Gertrude Stein, which I have already read, but I don't really remember what she said. And I feel like now that I've read Tender Buttons, I'll have a different appreciation for Gertrude Stein, and I want to read that again because she made some points in Gertrude's favor, which made me like her a bit more after I absolutely hated the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, which I read at a time when I was not really into literature the way that I am now due to studying it. It's a very different vibe. Anyway, the next book I finished, Companions of Nature, a Lake Poets Anthology. This is a book that I bought when I was at the lakes where all the poets went to die. There's some Wordsworth in here, there's Samuel Taylor Coleridge, there's also Dorothy Wordsworth in here, a bunch of other people who were all writing about the lakes or the vicinity of the lakes or things that were happening to their families surrounding the lakes, and some of these were great. I have to say, I am not much of a poetry girly, and I am trying to become one, and I'm learning to really love modern poetry, but I wasn't really big on old classic poetry ever, but some of these really went off. I'm gonna try to be more into classic poetry as well. This was a good souvenir. Then the last book, I mean, it's not really a book, it's a short story, but I have it, one of these editions again, and it's The Figure in the Carpet by Henry James, and we read this for our literature theory class, and this book is about, well, it's about literary criticism, but that's what the whole class was about. That was very meta. This book is about how criticism basically kind of just kills the vibe of literature. I had a good time in this story, even though it's described as James's troubling late Victorian mystery of an unsolved literary riddle. I missed the riddle because when the author who speaks the riddle says the riddle, I didn't realize it was a riddle. I thought he was just talking about the passion that writers feel and can't really explain. And I was like, go off, King. I annotated it. I didn't notice it was the clue of the story. But anyway, once I caught on to that, I was very excited for the narrator not to find out what the secret was. But sometimes you just have to be able to accept that things don't always mean something or can't be explained in our stupid, silly little words. You know, I think this is why I like Tender Button so much. Sometimes you just shouldn't think about things too much. And that's what I'm learning from this semester. Just not to think so much. That was all I read. I'm currently reading the Women Who Run with the Wolves, which is very long, and it's very long. I'm not going to be finishing that for a while. I'm also reading After Sappho. That has inspired me to pick up another one of these guys, only the Sappho. I think it's Come Closer? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Very short collection of Sappho's poetry. I thought I was reading something else. But yeah, I'm listening to a Dutch audiobook. Really good. I'll tell you about it next month. I also started reading Watchman for my adaptation class. Comic book. I don't like it. I don't think I'll be finishing that. Other than that, I was kind of hoping that today would be my first day of testosterone. It's not, but next week will probably be. I was kind of thinking, if I start testosterone on the first day of each month, then I can film my wrap-ups on the first day of each month, and then it'll be fun to like watch the progression of them while also just talking about books, because I'm not like gonna talk about all that. It turns out that it's not gonna work out that way. So I don't know what, I think next year I'm just gonna do my wrap-ups on like the 8th or the 9th. I don't know what day I'm starting now. So that's a mystery, but term is almost over, so I might film another video, but that's not a promise. I should start looking at which books were my favorites this year. I'm excited. I've read a lot of good books this year, so it's gonna be cool. Maybe I'll find another favorite this month. I mean, we have 30 more days to go, so. Well, next time you see me, you will probably know, and I will be maybe a little bit more of a boy. We'll see. It's all one big surprise. I'll see you then. Bye!